Welcome back to Your Dose. We're the plug for all things prevention.
And I'm your host, Alex. And before we start, we have a trigger warning where today's prescription is dating violence regarding teens. So just a trigger warning for that. We have our other podcast members.
My name is Livia.
I'm Malia.
And we have Kayla from Prudence Crandall.
Hi, my name is Kayla Edgeworth. I'm the community educator over at Prudence Crandall Center in New Britain.
Yeah. So to begin, we just want to start off with what is dating violence for teens?
So big question, right? So teen dating violence for specifically teens is any form of physical, emotional, psychological abuse that happens within a romantic relationship, right? This also can include technological abuse and has different behaviors like controlling, isolating, and things like that. Yeah, that's kind of what teen dating violence is in its summary.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's controlling and isolating. That sounds like a lot of what high schoolers go through for sure.
Yeah. And they don't really recognize the fact that it could fall under dating violence.
Yeah. Like, people don't, like, it's so normal that it's like, is this like violence? Like,
right.
What are some less obvious or overlooked signs of an abusive relationship? We were really interested in that.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, like you guys were talking about, a lot of young people are in relationships and don't really realize it's abusive, right? Because it's super normalized. So some of the signs that you can see that kind of get overlooked are like that jealousy and that possessiveness that we were talking about. So like, it comes across as like caring too much about like what you're doing on an everyday basis. But when you're in love, you love that feeling of attention, right? So it kind of gets overlooked. And then isolation from friends and family, that's kind of the biggest thing that we usually see, right? It's when they're trying to pull you away from everything that you usually know and love and kind of get you so isolated into their own little world, right? And then usually like checking in on your phone, blowing up your phone 24/7, asking you what you're doing, checking in on your location, different things. Obviously there's different levels to it, right? Because talking to somebody and like want to talk to them all the time, that's okay, right? And it's okay to want to talk to our partner, right? But there's levels to it that then gets really unhealthy. And then subtle manipulation like guilt tripping, like saying, for example, can be, so say you want to do something on your own, like say you want to go hang out with your family and be like, oh man, like this is Saturday, I haven't seen you all week, or we're at school and we're in class, and they're just guilt tripping you, right? Kind of making you question your reality a little bit. That's kind of the basis of a lot of those signs that kind of get overlooked.
Is that like you say, so that's the basis of signs? Is that like if like you were to continue with that relationship, is most likely that those signs to like grow?
Yeah, very possible.
Like into like bigger things.
Yeah, it doesn't mean every relationship that has these signs is going to be abusive relationship, but it is something to kind of acknowledge early and kind of bring attention to and kind of stomp it out, right? Because at that point, you're kind of just setting them up to having that level of control and manipulation over you versus like when you have a normal relationship and a happy relationship, there's gonna be a lot of open communication, right? There's gonna be a lot of like free will within the relationship, independence, right? That's what a good relationship is, not when someone's like kind of like a dark cloud over you. Then that's when we kind of got that issue.
Right. Yeah. I feel like the most prominent like signs we see like in our age group is probably like possessiveness and guilt tripping, because since we can't live with our partners because we're minors and stuff like that, we can't, people don't get the opportunity to like physically abuse most of the time, but people get very possessive, like especially in school, like people want to see each other all the time, like you want to walk in the hallway or be together at lunch. You don't get, you don't ever get a break. So I feel like that's another like,
because you guys are at school for 40 hours a week, right? That's a full-time job of 8 hours, clocking in, coming to school, and then you just have your partner with you 24/7. Say you have classes together, or say you don't have classes together, they're waiting for you in the hallway, like they're learning your schedule. It gets really intrusive after a while, right?
Like what you're saying, like with our, especially our schedule, is like a lot of times you're in a relationship, and if you do any extracurriculars or clubs, like that could take the time after, and say you couldn't see each other like in school, then like when it comes to the weekends, those are when people fight those battles of like, oh, I wanted to go hang out with my friends today, or I want to hang out with my family, and like then that you're hearing it from your partner, and I don't think a lot of people realize that is like abuse in a relationship.
It is abusive. It's that emotional abuse, right? It's making you question your reality, making you question your choices on a day-to-day basis. When before you met that person, that was your norm, right? You're going to practice, you're going to school, you're hanging out with your family and your friends, but then that starts to change after this person comes into your life, Like I said, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be abusive and it's going to get physical or sexually violent, but it is the basis of that emotional manipulation kind of thing.
Like for partner wise, do you think like dating violence is learned like through culturally or like through their environment? Like where do you think that like originates from?
That's a good question, right? So most abusers, they don't just like wake up one day and they're like, yes, I'm gonna abuse someone today, right? There's usually a lot of aspects, like you said, environmentally, culturally, that go into it, right? So what we're seeing is what you're saying before is teens find certain aspects of a relationship to be normal, right? Because of TikTok, things like that, social media that kind of glorify, you know, being that kind of crazy partner, right? Being on top of whatever your partner's doing, right? And especially I feel like girls kind of get typecasted into this of like being very like controlling and knowing everything that their male partner is doing, because you know all these stereotypes that are against males, that they're, you know, usually kind of silly, a little, they're gonna do something stupid or they're gonna cheat on you. All those fears are kind of playing in your head, and then it kind of impacts your relationship. So I feel like cultural and social is really big right now, especially with social media and like the way you guys are just constantly exposed to it. And another thing is too, in some cultures there's a lot of gender roles, right? Gender roles is kind of the basis of a lot of these things where we see with teen dating violence and any kind of violence is like we see these people kind of fall into these different roles of like the man needs to provide, right? So the man has control of their finances and things like that, and the woman needs to provide for the household, kind of gets trapped into those kind of duties. So when teens, all those things that you're seeing at home are going to start coming to play into your own relationships, right? Because you're just going to start repeating what you've seen and what you're used to. So if you've only seen kind of abusive relationships, whether it's like technological, emotional, or even physical or sexual, that's what you're going to mimic in your own relationships, right? And then we also have that fact that, you know, teens in different marginalized communities, they also have like unique risks because they don't have access to see different things, different positive things as someone would in like a different neighborhood, right? Talking about New Britain specifically, it's a big city, right? There's a lot of kids that go through these cracks and see violence on a daily basis that never really get acknowledged, right? So then you compare that to somebody that lives in like, I don't know, Avon, right? Someone I believe it's still, domestic violence is still happening, but it's going to be a lot more behind closed doors, and the violence isn't going to be right outside their doorstep like it is in the city, right?
Yeah, it's like a lot of times it's like all they know. Like you think like they're more likely to like be the person like given the dating violence if it's just one parent household or is like two parent household, like what kind of household is it most likely for someone to like be kind of like more likely to go through or like be that abuser?
So that's an interesting question because you're kind of talking about two kind of big kind of sources, right? You're talking about like that single parent dynamic, and then you have the two parents, but say it's the two parents that shouldn't be together, right? And then they have that domestic violence situation happening within the home. Well, you may have that single parent where the different risks are now you have different partners coming into the home that may be domestically abusive, or then you have different partners that have kids, like you have siblings and things like that with different partners of your parents. It gets things a lot more complicated because now you have all these personalities coming into play. So it's hard to say which one is specifically more at risk. I would say both are, just because based off what I've seen in the past, I feel like they all lead to a higher amount of exposure, right? Because especially if your parents are together and they shouldn't be together and they're exposing you to all that kind of drama that way, it's going to force you like, oh, this is normal, this is okay, because you have to stick it out, right? They're together, they love each other, that's why they're sticking it out and they're staying there for the kids. Necessarily, is that a good thing? Can't always tell. It depends on the kid, right? It depends on the family. It depends on how it impacts everybody. And the same thing with the single mom. There can be single moms or single parents out there that have relationships that their kids never even know about. Right. So it's all really depends on the situation. But it is a good question, a good thing to think about, right? When we're talking about domestic violence and how it affects everybody, right? Everybody has their own relationship to it because of what they've seen, what they've heard, and how they've been exposed to it. So that's
I definitely think social media has played a big role in it. In like our era of teen dating violence, like maybe not so much in the past, but like right now I think it's very prevalent that it's like funny, or it's even like it's like real to
like normalize
like to express those kind of controlling behaviors and to make your relationship kind of like very public. And I think that can really damage a relationship and make it unhealthy.
Yeah, especially the public aspect. I haven't really thought about that. But yeah, you're posting your relationship constantly online, and then if say anything kind of stops, like you stop posting for a little bit, everybody around you's gonna be like, oh, what happened with them? Oh, they broke up. So then you have the rumor mill chugging, right? And your relationship could be perfectly fine, but now you're thinking about, again, questioning your reality on like what's happening, what is real, and that's what's happening in that situation because of that social media use, and it's impacting your relationship in that way. This is a really good point.
Instagram breaks relationships up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
It's really fake.
I remember when Snapchat came out. Snapchat came out when I was in high school, and I used to have the best friends list and used to be able to see it. You know how many relationships I saw crumble?
Like, you used to be able to see like
Oh,
who's
'cause
on
of
who's friend.
See,
Look, the
that's
Because of who's on
username.
your best friends list?
Yep. So you can
They
see
would
what
break-
username was your number one best friend.
Oh.
So it's based off
That's
of who.
dangerous.
Yeah.
So dangerous. The
my
amount of
It's not
fights.
even a
and-
big deal.
Yeah, it's not a big
Like
deal.
people
right?
are very worried about like the superficial aspects of relationships, like social media and all that stuff. Like it shouldn't matter if you really want to be with someone. Like it shouldn't matter who's their number one best friend or who they text the most.
Exactly.
Like you should just be in it for the long run. But because we're so young, it's like that's not what we're focused on. We're more focused on like where
how we
they
look,
are,
how people are perceived. Everyone's worried about
Exactly.
like
And it definitely affects because like it creates the aspect of like exposure
Mhm.
abuse, which is like if you were to spread pictures or videos of your partner or ex-partner
Mhm.
even that were private to the two of you, like it creates a whole new layer of
Yep.
of why you should never leave this person, and
Yep.
I think that can definitely contribute to
Yeah, it's that,
abusive
Yeah,
relationships.
that use and power of control, right? To
Mhm.
keep you there, that state of coercive control to keep you in a relationship. So if by gaslighting you or manipulating you by using images to keep you like, oh, I have these pictures of us. If you break up with me, I'm about to post them everywhere.
Right.
Well, nobody's gonna leave
That's
that
scary,
relationship,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
scary.
and like that's just one level, right? Then you have other relationships where people try to leave and it's like, I'm gonna kill myself. You know, that's a heavy one too,
Yeah.
especially dealing with a teenager. What are you guys supposed to do when someone tells you that, right? What's
Yeah.
your first
Exactly.
reaction? Like, especially if you love that person, you want them to be alive, you want them to be okay. So you're gonna be okay bending over backwards to whatever demand that they want in that moment, right? And that's just kind of setting that precedent that they can pull that card on you and you kind of fall back into that rhythm, right? So it all goes back to that coercive control, right? The use of manipulation to keep you in that relationship and entrapped in that relationship.
Yeah.
And the big thing too I want to talk about is males, right? Boys, you guys have it tough, right? Because you have these kind of pressure from the culture and environment that you guys have to be a certain way. You have to be masculine. You have to be tough. If you're asking for help or if you're in a relationship where you're being abused, you're weak, right? You're the man. You're supposed to establish yourself in the
Yeah.
relationship, right? But then people don't realize that 13% of the hotline calls that we had at Prudence Crandall came from males. 13%, right? So 13% out of the thousands of calls we get a year. That's super underreported. Because I remember we were talking about when I presented to you guys a while back that when you guys did the New Britain Youth Survey, 147 6th to 12th graders said that they were in a physically abusive relationship in New Britain, right? Said it on a survey. So just imagine that and that statistic, right? And then you have that 13% of males. That's just the stuff that's reported. Right? How many people don't even know they're in abusive relationships like we were talking about, and that's not even reported. So that number for males should be a lot higher, but they just don't
People
realize
don't
it,
even realize.
or have the tools, or have that ability, or that confidence to even try to reach
Or
out for
they're
help.
embarrassed because there's such a
Mhm.
stigma around men being like
Yeah.
the controlling partner.
Yeah.
And it's also so normalized for like a male to like be controlled or like be like for the girl to know everything like is going
Right.
on. Like that's just a normal. People don't see that as like something wrong. Like, but that actually goes into like exactly what we were gonna go into next. Like, what are the differences between like the male and female aspect of like the abusive relationship? You already touched on like the male, but like
Yeah.
what are some like female commonalities?
So for females, it's the same thing that we're kind of talking about. You guys kind of get put in this box of like you have to be controlling, you have to be on top of your partner, right? And so with females, we usually see that we have like they want to protect her. They want to be the protector. They want to kind of protect whoever they're in the relationship with, right? So they're going to go above and beyond to kind of protect that and protect what they have, especially if you have a female or a male that just doesn't really have a supportive circle around them before getting into that
Yeah.
relationship. That whole person in that relationship becomes their support system, right? And that's a lot to carry at 14, 15, 16 years old. And, you know, teenagers are going through heavy stuff, right? No matter what gender you are. So it's difficult in that regard. And for both, you know, there's always the shared fear of not being believed or taken seriously, right? Especially if it's so normal and common in our communities that we're seeing that, going back to that stigma, when people ask for help, sometimes they get dismissed. Sometimes they're not given the space to actually disclose what's going on to them because whoever they're talking to, because of whatever reason, is looking at them and it's like, this girl has had issues with boyfriends in the past. I shouldn't listen to this. Or this guy, you know, he's kind of mean to his girlfriend, like in person. He deserves it, kind of thing. You know, those different stigmas are going to play with adults as well because they're not always trained on what to do and how to respond to things like that. So yeah, it comes in a lot of different ways. We see that male and female.
Yeah.
Right, and going back to like people who don't have a strong support system, like what I was thinking is for the partner, like let's say it's a male, if they don't have a strong support system around them, like they'll probably be more likely to be attracted to what they don't have. Like they'll be attracted to a female who cares about them and wants to know how they are. If they don't have someone like at home that's worried about them and how they are. So it's like they're kind of like subconsciously putting themselves in like the situation of being in an abusive relationship, and they don't even realize it.
Yeah, and you have to also think about the fact of what is the definition of a caring relationship if you've never seen it, right? So you don't even know what an actual caring relationship looks like until you're just searching for it and you find it on your own, right? So that is tough. That is a really tough aspect to
especially in our demographic, like caring relationship, that's not prevalent. A lot of people, many people, we have one parent households, like we have people who barely see their parents or working all the time, or they work certain shifts. So like to have the model relationship, people don't have that. So all they know is what they see, and what they see is not good. Like,
Yeah, and it's hard too because in that single parent household too, think about the levels of exposure that you can have just because your parents are working 12 hours a day, you're only at school for 8 hours a day. What's happening in those extra hours, right? And you're in a relationship and they know that. They're going to be coming to your house, they're going to hang out with you. I know you got this free time in this certain period because your mom's working all the time, your dad's working all the time, that too, So it's just, you're going to want to fill in your space, especially, I feel like that's where a big thing of where extracurriculars are so important, like doing sports, being in clubs, being a part of something like this is so important because it's going to keep you busy. It's going to keep you kind of away from that idle time where things like this could happen, where you can kind of have somebody kind of step into your world and take up that extra space, right? And another thing too is like we're talking about mostly male and females, but let's talk about LGBT, right? So support systems. Imagine someone comes out and their family does not support them at all, right? No support system at all. So then they're going to be looking for even more of that validation and security when they're looking for a relationship. And unfortunately, usually they look in the wrong places, right? So LGBT usually have the highest rates of domestic violence and teen dating violence because, again, they're looking for that security no matter what that may look for. Or there's also the risk of being outed, right? So they'll stay trapped in relationships, say it's their first relationship with a male or a female, and that they know they're gay, but nobody else around them knows. That information can be used against them, right? So then they're going to be scared to leave that relationship, or going back to like pictures and stuff like that. Those different things can come up, and especially in LGBT relationships, that's where we're seeing it the highest for sure, which is an interesting thing because you wouldn't think that because media usually focuses on the male and the woman, but those rates are way higher for woman on woman and male on male, which is quite interesting to even think about.
That makes sense. Like a lot of people, there's a big stigma around like certain things, and it's like if you like just come out and you're trying to find someone like with like a commonality with you, and you're trying to find things in common, so like to fall into a relationship just with the person based on their sexuality, I can see how that can be like normal,
Yeah, it's tough too, especially again looking for that security. Say you don't have that model parent at home, sometimes these people are looking for different older people, right? That happens a lot with girls that we see. They look for older men, same thing with males, they look for older women, and that again is pushing that pattern because you have teenagers that are dating someone that's over 20 years old. Why is a 20-year-old talking to a teenager, right? There's a lot of things that are happening in that aspect, right, that we need to talk about that aren't being addressed. But, a young girl that's looking for security, safety, doesn't have that support at home is going to quickly run into that situation.
Someone that's older,
Exactly.
And she'll let them treat her however, because she doesn't have it like at home.
Yeah. So it's a difficult situation I feel like for females and guys and males, they have their own kind of trials and tribulations when it comes to this. Just all really depends on your perspective and what you want to look at.
Yeah. I kind of want to move it to like, we talked a lot about the dating violence and like what bad relationships look like, but like we can kind of shift it to like what are some like what do healthy relationships like, what do they resemble, and especially in teens I feel like that's big. Like people need to know exactly what a healthy relationship is and like certain things that should be normalized in a healthy relationship.
Yeah. So I feel like the biggest thing is that mutual respect, right? Respecting each other's boundaries, opinions, and their feelings. Because knowing that you guys are two individuals that are coming together to form a relationship, right? That doesn't mean you're two individuals coming together to become one individual, right? So kind of setting those boundaries, maintaining that independence is the biggest thing that you can really start off with. If you feel like they're really kind of pushing that respect, pushing your boundaries, that should be a huge red flag, right? Next thing, open communication, which is hard, right? We're teenagers. We're not always able to really talk about our feelings because we don't even know what we're feeling, right? Because you're just going through so many different things on a normal basis when it comes to emotions and just being a person. I mean, your brains aren't fully developed. So sometimes you're not going to be able to put the words to the emotions that you're feeling, but just having that, open communication about feeling safe to express your thoughts, even if your partner disagrees with you, just being able to talk to them about it, right? There's different things that you, especially as you grow up, that you're going to have conversations, especially when you're talking about finances, talking about like housing, things like that. Those are going to be some tough conversations and relationships. And if you can't have that open communication when you're just dating, say you get married, that's a lot of those things are going to start coming up that way, right? And then we have just equality in decision making, right? So you don't want one person just controlling everything that the other person is doing. You want to see a nice balance in that kind of regard. So you don't want to see someone trying to dominate the other person, like, oh, you need to do what I'm telling you to do, right? What do we want to do? What do you think? What do I think? Kind of finding that common ground is like the basis, I feel like, of a healthy relationship. Yeah. What do you guys think?
No, I think that's yeah. People need to be taking notes. I hope people got their notebook out right now. I think it's just really big to communicate and to make sure that it's not one-sided, people gotta understand, especially in high school, there's a lot of different extracurriculars. Like everyone in our program has something else going on. And so it's like what I talked about like earlier about like the balance of time, like, oh, on the weekends, like is your only free time, you might want to go like see a friend or like go like hang out with your family. And I feel like your other partner has to be able to realize that that's your time and like you have like that time with each other, but your person also needs to spend time with their other loved ones too. Right. So just the understanding aspect I feel like is big, especially in teens. That's why a lot of relationships break up or end. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, it's kind of relating to that. I would say is independence. And it's specific, like for me, I would say like in my relationships, it's very easy for me to depend on other people. And I feel like it's kind of almost self-sabotaging because when you depend on someone for happiness, it always is going to end up making you unhappy. And like the more you rely and you expect and you require of someone, the harder it's going to be for you to feel satisfied. So it's more of an internal thing that I have to work on. But I think definitely two people being in a relationship, knowing that they are both gonna have to be okay without each other no matter what happens, is very beneficial to it makes it easier to separate, it makes it easier to see your family and your friends, stuff like that.
Just be a person, right?
I feel like it should be normalized to like grow in a relationship, like help each other grow, like even if it doesn't work out, like if you can still like be a better person with each other, and then okay, maybe we have to break it off because certain things, but if it's still beneficial to be in a relationship if we're both trying to work to grow, be a better person.
And you also have to think too, you guys are in high school, middle school, like you guys are so young, you haven't even experienced most of your life yet. So like a lot of these relationships, you want them to work, you want them to go to the next level, but the odds are it's usually not, right? And that's kind of I feel like the hard part about being a teen, because it's like either you're all 100 into somebody or you're nothing, right? It's 0 or 100. That's kind of where you're at, especially when you're thinking about the future and stuff like that. It's just a lot of pressure to have on a relationship, especially I know you guys are like seniors and juniors. You're thinking about taking those next steps outside of New Britain, right? You're ready to go either across the state to different states for school. And like if you're thinking about a partner, you're not going to want to do all that stuff, right? I'm not saying don't have a relationship, but I'm just saying those different things are going to impact you, especially at this young age when you're in a relationship. So just being aware of that, maintaining your independence, knowing your self-worth, and knowing who you are regardless of who this person is, if they're in your life or not in your life, is going to be key, very, very key in these kind of situations.
I had people ask me like do you think like my boyfriend's gonna like keep me like in college, like this and that? And it's like it's hard because like you're really thinking about that next step, and it's like, dang, I'm gonna be in another state and my partner's gonna maybe stay home, and then we're gonna do a long distance, and I'm like, is this even really gonna be my wife? Like so it's a lot of things that go on through the head, so I'm already knowing this.
And meanwhile you don't even know who you are yet, right? Because you're still, that's why you're going to school, that's why you're going to college, because you're trying to have these experiences and grow as a person, as yourself, right? So sometimes when you're in these relationships, it's really hard to grow as yourself. And so say you're in a relationship all throughout high school and you get to college and you break up like your sophomore, junior year, who are you outside of that? Like who are you once they leave and they're not in that relationship with you? Like you're gonna have to start from square one, and you're gonna feel like you're a freshman in high school again, right? It's scary, right? And And that's why a lot of people stay, because they want to, we got to make it work. We've had this status. Everybody knows that we've been together for so long. We can't break up. We're the it couple kind of thing.
We posted each other on social media for so long.
Going back to what we were talking about with the social media environmental factors, right? Those are the things that keep us in a relationship that necessarily aren't that person, but just the world around us kind of helps keep us in that relationship because of that status kind of thing.
Yeah. Earlier we talked about like being like manipulated and things like that. Like, if you find yourself like having manipulative like tendencies, like what are some things you could do to like try to prevent that or like be better? Because I know a lot of people are manipulative, but the few that like figure out like, oh dang, I am being manipulative, like what are some things that could like help them? Like,
well, the first thing is I feel like defining manipulation, right? It's defining what these behaviors look like, because it's going to be hard for you guys to adjust them if you don't know what they are, right? So that's why things like prevention is so important. So even just doing that research yourself, talking to people, the biggest thing is I think you're kind of taking it away. It's just kind of self-reflection. Like, just look at yourself, look at your patterns, look at what you do, see if you've ever tried to be in control or pressure your partner or intimidate someone to getting into what you want. Just because you've done it a couple times doesn't mean you're an abuser, right? Let's not go running around saying, oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world because like I've manipulated one person one time. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, right? You're just repeating behaviors that you've seen before.
Right.
Another big thing is just paying attention to those boundaries, right? Check yourself. I think check and balances is the biggest thing when in relationships.
Or like maybe creating boundaries.
Yeah. And that's a big thing. A lot of people get in a relationship and don't know how to create boundaries until the boundaries are already crossed, right? And then now you're backtracking and like, oh, like I didn't like this, that made me uncomfortable. Now you're kind of in this weird power dynamic with your partner of like, oh, so how do we recover from this, right? So now you set that boundary, but now they're already so used to pushing it, it's just going to kind of keep getting pushed kind of thing. So yeah, setting boundaries as early as possible, trying to define those for yourself is really important. Or also, you know, if you see this in yourself, talk to somebody, because usually there's something a lot bigger than what you're going through and what you're thinking about happening in your life that's causing you to have these kind of tendencies, right? So talking to a counselor, talking to a trusted adult is a huge step. Granted, not every trusted adult may have the best advice for you, so take that with a grain of salt, but try talking to like a counselor or somebody in the community that kind of is a professional in this kind of world or has a good idea of what healthy relationships looks like, and just kind of talking to them about it. Be like, hey, like I'm noticing like I'm being really controlling of him, like, or her, cause I don't know why, like maybe because X, Y, and Z is happening at home, like I feel a little out of control at home and I think I'm taking it out on my partner. Like having those conversations, it's hard to have as a teenager, but even just trying to start that communication is going to be really beneficial for you guys.
Yeah, definitely, and not only with like a mentor, but having it with the partner as well. Certain thing, I have a mentor myself, and certain thing like we have done with different relationships in my life, we create these things called pillars. And so it's like different pillars, like we have an immediacy pillar, we have an emotional health pillar, we have a support pillar. So we just defined like these things in our relationships that we value, and under those things that we value, we create like definitions, like immediacy. Like if I feel like you said something or did something that like I might have like felt disrespected or felt some type, I tell you immediately instead of like letting that thing dwell in my head and then like build up to something built to something bigger than it should be. So those things is things that I practice in my relationships that are like strong relationships that I really genuinely care about, and I feel like it could be valuable for other people, you know?
And the thing is too is what you're talking about takes a little bit of time, right? And it's a little uncomfortable to sit and kind of think about like where you're lacking or where you're strong, right? It's really hard to have that conversation with yourself, let alone having it with a partner. So like setting it up with pillars, I think that's a great idea, because that's literally you setting the foundation for your relationship. Even if it doesn't work out, this is your foundation, and this is something you're going to always fall back on your relationships. And say there's something that goes wrong in that relationship, let's look back at those pillars that we started off and see what went wrong.
Like
right?
Those pillars usually, I do like maybe a bi-weekly check-in. So like every Sunday we'll check in on our pillars and we'll grade them, see how well have we been doing with these certain things. That's awesome. Those are certain techniques I use. I
think that's especially important as like, because you're a senior, we're juniors, and like many of us, if we are getting into relationships, we're looking to bring them to the next level. Like I think if you're interested in pursuing someone farther than just high school, like as soon as you get into the relationship, you should set forth your like beliefs, values, and your boundaries, just so that it doesn't come up later in the relationship and just like breaks it all down.
Yeah. And the difficult thing I would say for this, and I should have brought it up earlier when we were talking about cultural, is the hookup culture, right? There's a huge hookup culture in this kind of generation right now. So it makes it hard to try to set those foundations because you're in a situationship with somebody for like 6 months. Meanwhile, with the situationship, you're practically dating, right? You're going through pretty much emotional manipulation through that whole situationship. And then you start dating, your foundation and your pillars are already so shaky because you guys have been toying each other along the whole whatever time period before you start dating, right? So that's the other hard aspect because, you know, in the culture, we're seeing a lot of that hookup situationships be taking more place more versus just like a regular relationship, you know, like I like you, you like me, let's just start dating kind of thing. That's not really happening anymore, right? I might be wrong, but is that kind of true?
I mean, there's definitely there's definitely both. I would say there are people who just date normally, but there's also a lot of
serial daters
situations.
And what does that all come down to? Commitment, right? They're scared of making that commitment. So like things you can think about that, it's like, why are they scared to make that commitment? What about themselves is making them scared, so they're just going to toil along with everybody else's emotions just to get that gratification, right? So there's a lot of questions that can be kind of asked in those relationships too, because they're not necessarily taking that next step and maybe being violent or anything towards that person, but there's still emotional kind of turmoil going on and technological probably happening all within that little space. So it's interesting. It's really interesting. You guys really have to deal with a lot. I'm very proud of you guys because especially with the pillars. I think the pillars is a really cool way, especially being a male senior in high school and you play sports too. Being someone in the community that can do that and kind of take that step back and check in with your partner is huge. Like I cannot say, I don't think I've ever heard of anybody ever doing that before. So kudos to you. That's really cool.
No, kudos to my mentor. Yeah.
Shout out to your mentor. Yeah. Shout him out. That's awesome.
Best, yeah. So we can move it to like really. Like we go through people go through a lot of abusive relationships and violent relationships. Like, but what if like, say my sibling is going through that relationship, or like I have a friend that's going through a relationship. Like, is it like someone's place to even help, or like how could they help? Like,
it's difficult, right? Because every situation is going to be different. Right? Every friend, every sibling is going to have a different reaction, going back to everybody's relationship to domestic violence, right? So they may not necessarily see it. So you coming in and telling them that, hey, like, I don't really think this is going too well, that's going to be really jarring. It's going to make people kind of be like, oh, like, what are you talking about? And get really defensive, right? So the biggest thing, especially if it's like a friend or somebody your age, try to talk to them. And if they're not being supportive or being like very open to you, just keep being unconditional, right? Keep giving them that space and grace. Know that they're in an unhealthy relationship and they may do things that you're not necessarily going to agree with, right? So if they are, maybe tune in a trusted adult, tune in another friend or two that kind of know what's going on with the situation. Like say it's like a close friend, or say it's like your sibling. I feel like is a great example. Tell your mom, tell your dad, you know, talk to, if you have another sibling, talk to that sibling, right? Whoever you trust in your family unit or in your friend unit, start telling them about it. Be like, hey, keep an eye on this. Like, see, I'm seeing some weird things happening with X, Y, and Z. Talk to them about that, right? And if you want to go even beyond that, you can always do like community centers and things like that always offer help. I know Prudence Crandall, you guys can always feel free to like call us. Even if you don't know exactly what you need, just give us a call. We'll talk to you about it. Even if you're just having big feelings about whatever you're seeing in your friends' relationships, just call, right? Because what's the harm that can happen, right? Just talking and getting resources and just getting different ideas on how to approach it. So for you guys, I would just say approach the situation with compassion. Know at the end of the day, that's either your sibling, your family member, or your friend, and no matter what, you're going to try to be there and love and support them. But also know you're not a superhero, right? You can't handle everything by yourself. So kind of have that idea of just setting those boundaries for yourself, right? Don't burn yourself out emotionally trying to save this person, because it's going to be hard, right? I've lost friends because of really bad relationships, and it sucks, right? But at the same time, me walking away doesn't make me a bad friend necessarily. It just means I set my boundaries on what I can handle for myself and in my little bubble, right? Doesn't mean if, you know, if they were to break up or if that friend needed support, they can still call me. Doesn't matter what the situation is. They can still call me. I just may have to take a step back because it's, you know, it's passing that emotional threshold for me. And the biggest thing is too, is just educate yourself, right? Keep educating universally. Tell people, hey, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. Set those boundaries. Talk about those pillars normally, you know, talk about that kind of stuff, because it's going to help set the foundation for everybody around you. If you start having a great relationship, they're going to be like, oh man, I want something like that. How do you guys do that? You know, kind of talk talk about that openly. And the biggest thing is just encourage people to ask, get help, right? Don't pressure them, don't force them into getting help. Just be encouraging, right? Be like, hey, you know, it seems like you guys are having a bad day today. Remember, I have this resource that we can always call together. If you want to call or hit up the chat line online, let's hit up the chat line. Let's talk to somebody for a little bit. Or, hey, we have an extra free period. Let's go talk to our counselor, or we have youth prevention. Let's go talk to our trusted adults at youth prevention about what's going on. You can even be vague, right? Yeah. That's the crazy thing about these situations. You don't have to use all your details when it comes to confidentiality and reporting, right? You can use a Jane Doe, you can use a fake name and just call and talk to somebody, right? And just get your words out, get your emotions out, and go from there and kind of get those next steps. Especially when you're supporting like other people, it's like I said, you're not always going to get the best response or the best answers from other people, but if you are unconditional and give people their space and grace to kind of grow as an individual and give that unconditional love, they'll come back to you. You know, it's going to come back to you eventually. You know, or they're going to know that person was there for me and was trying the best for me in that moment. I may not have been able to see it, but I know I can come back and be that trusted person, right? Maintaining that support system is so huge, really huge.
Like a way to like build like off what are the pillars, like to practice them. I use it to, I have a sister, we started making pillars with my sister, like certain like different things that we want to see in the relationship on like a ground level, to like be able to practice it, to maybe when I get into a relationship I already have that being comfortable with those certain things, like so like just like talking with your sibling or talking with a friend, just to practice those good habits before even getting into a relationship with someone. I think that's just big on its own.
And also acknowledging the things that are wrong around you, right? So we're going to be, again, like we were saying, we're going to be exposed to stuff that may not be okay. Like I know on social media we have things going on with like Diddy and stuff like that, where it's a joke, right? It's a joke. We laugh about it, but it's so uncomfortable. That's why we laugh about it when we make jokes, because if we talked seriously about what's going on with him, the amount of things and different paths that are going on, you know, there's so much going on, so many layers, and all that reflects us as a society, and we're not ready for that conversation, you know. So that's why we make jokes about it, right? I feel like that's why that culture is very much so like that. You know, it happens. It's always something that we see, especially with heavy topics. Everybody's gonna either laugh it off or just gonna run away from it, right? They don't want to deal with it. So, you know, it all depends.
Laughing it off is common for sure. Kind of just want to finish it off with like just personally, like what are some ways I know we went over a lot, but like what are just some specific ways like to support yourself? And I think we can close it off with those.
I feel like the biggest way you can support yourself is just self-love, self-care, self-worth. Really just know who you are in and out. Notice if you start changing yourself or kind of minimizing yourself for the other person that you're with. You know, if you feel like you're changing, if you feel like you're getting really small, I feel like that's a good way to put it. If you feel like you're getting really small and this person's just getting bigger and bigger over you, you got an issue. You got to look at it. We may not know what the issue is exactly, but there's something going on here that needs to be talked about, right? There's that power dynamic that's starting to form.
I think it's very easy to lose your identity in a relationship, and I think I definitely experienced it. I felt like when I was out of that relationship, it was so hard on me because I felt like I didn't know who I was.
Exactly.
And I know you kind of talked about that earlier, how like when you get into a long-term relationship as a teen, when you get out of that, it's like you don't even really know where to start. And I kind of felt like that because I hadn't been, it was just like so many little things that you don't realize that you're so intertwined with until like you get to that point. Like you realize you hadn't been to school without having a boyfriend in that school for 2 years. Like it just things like that kind of make it very difficult to value yourself before your partner, because it's very easy to associate your like value in yourself with their self and not be able to distinguish between the two.
Like you say, like being in high school and like having a boyfriend for like 2 years and then not having it, but like I know people who date in 6th grade, like 7th grade. So I'm like,
So
who are you really? Like,
who are you guys even
like,
dating?
If you break up, like who you haven't been with someone from 6th or 7th grade till like you don't know who you are. And I think it just starts with like the parents' education. Parents need to be more involved in their kids' life and kind of maybe staying away from those relationships before their kids are confident in themselves, they're confident in who they are, and they know their kids have like those values and certain things.
I think your relationships with like just your loved ones around you before it gets romantic need to be established before you start pursuing romantic partners, like your friends, your siblings, your parents. Like once you have good relationships with them, then I feel like you can start branching out romantically. But before that, like I don't think it's appropriate.
And it's tough though when you have all this pressure from society of like you need to find somebody.
Yeah.
You go on
There's
TikTok
a lot
and
of
this is the tarot
pressure.
card readings of this person's gonna be in your love life. You know, all this crazy stuff, right? It's all this crazy stuff that's getting pushed on you all the time. So it's hard when you're, especially if you're young and if you don't have the ability or the support system to even establish that for yourself. How do you know like, oh, I'm not ready to be in a relationship, but like everybody around me is, you know? So it's hard. It's really hard. So it's just, again, just taking your time, you know, knowing yourself, and also look how you are with your friendships, right?
Yeah.
If you're in friendships, I know especially with girls, sometimes we see with girls is they get very controlling of like who their friends can be friends with, right? And so that's kind of a red flag. If you're seeing that in your own personal friendships, maybe we shouldn't start dating until we figure that stuff out, right? Or maybe, oh, I don't trust my friend to go hang out with my other friends without me. Why do you care so much, right?
You're not dating them.
They're friends. They're gonna have that relationship whether you're there or not. Yeah. So again, it kind of goes again to that maintaining that individuality and knowing when, if you're coming into a friendship, a relationship, a professional relationship, you are you, they are them. That is okay. And then you have that relationship that bridges you guys in between. It's not you going to their side, them coming to your side, and just kind of morphing to one. You guys are two different pillars, like you're kind of saying, and there's a bridge in between you, and that's the relationship. So kind of keeping that relationship on that bridge versus pulling each other together and becoming like one pillar, I feel like it's the best way to kind of look at it.
I like that.
Right? The pillars, I was
kind
of clicking off that,
I
right?
like that. The bridge, I like that addition. Yeah, that's good.
No, this is awesome.
That's
guys.
a good note to end on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys
I
so much for
appreciate
having
this.
me.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.